Hello guys, quick video today. I would, or maybe not that quick, because I would like to do a build update just before New Year trip. I will be back January, probably 2nd. Maybe I will also start streaming again at that time. We'll see. But for now, let's do a quick roundup showcase of current build. So as I mentioned, the explanation will be later. Now I will just show, like the essential stuff. So that was the gear, gems. Okay, so let's do skill tree. Oh, yeah, that's the majority, I would say. The start is the same. I added here some stuff. Okay, so that was the short part and the explanation. So the main explanation why I moved or why I did some changes here and there was the idea to move to the Creed version of Lightning Conduit to deal even more damage. So I decided, like I need more and more skill points. So I tested some stuff, like first on paper. I used some build planner, and I noticed that if I put this jewel here, which a lot of people, maybe not a lot of, but some people on Reddit really dislike this idea. They really, one of them even, like felt offensive that I want to use this jewel here. He accused me of, like trading of those jewel that I post the previous video for money, which is fucking insane. But some people are, like really resentful and dumb, I guess. But that's another story. So yeah, the main reason why I use this jewel here was to gain some additional free skill points to use them elsewhere. And I think the trade-off is really good, especially if you want, like more and more damage and the survivability, the defenses are, like enough. For example, when I transition from my previous version with points here and there to this version, I lost around 800, maybe 1000 energy shield. But to be honest, with that amount of damage, usually I don't need a lot of defensive layers because everything just die. So why bother? And for me, it was always more fun to stack more and more damage than to stack more and more defensive layers. Yeah, like especially when I used to play Path of Exile 1. Yeah, I get that, like sometimes, maybe not yet in Path of Exile 2, but especially in Path of Exile 1, you could encounter, where you require to have a lot of defensive layers, like for example, veiled maps in Path of Exile 1, but in Path of Exile 2, if you kill stuff quick enough, there is no that much of a danger anymore, you know, like especially if you are energy shield basis, you know, like ignore so much amount of additional stupid chaos damage stuff that it's insane. Like the main reason, because at the beginning of the Path of Exile 2, I wanted to, you know, like be life based, but especially at the start, the amount of chaos damage everywhere, like even normal mobs shooting some poison projectiles or some chaos stuff at you, it was so crazy that going chaos inculation was you know, like necessary. But now, even now, I believe it's really helpful because you can, you know, like ignore a lot of modifiers. But I guess you already know it, how overpowered in Path of Exile 2 being able to ignore chaos damage is. So yeah, so I made a few changes here and there to get as much as possible either crit defense or crit multiplier. So the main change is, you know, like unpicking everything here, here, and here to pick this for the additional shock because I changed my wand. My previous wand had increased chance to shock. The new one doesn't, so I guess it's helpful to some degree because this 5% of lightning damage as extra cold damage. I don't really notice cold damage, you know, like applying chill and everything. I don't really notice because the 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 monster, the stuff dies so quickly that it doesn't really matter if you chill them or not. So yeah, so that's a little of damage and shock chance. Here, crit chance. Um, Hits reduce critical hit chance against you. I guess it's also helpful. But yeah, I decided to, you know, like keep those free to go there to, you know, like regain this lost jewel socket here. And, you know, like pick some crit chance, crit damage bonus there. At first, I also have the points here, but I think those are the trap because, as I mentioned, skill points are, you know, like the most scarce, the most valuable resources. So those 3 points are way better spent, for example, here or there, or even more crit multiplier or crit chance because if we read, it's only mentioned it's, you know, like 20% increased damage, and, you know, like increased damage. It's also, you know, like cool and fancy, but crit multiplier or crit chance, those are even better. Yeah, because increase and multipliers in Path of Exile especially work differently. So multipliers are always something more, and increase, it's the effects of increase are often way lower, like couple of times lower. So that's it. That's the main change here. I will also mention my plan for the future because I would modify the skill tree and gear and everything even more. But because of this trip and because of the fact that I believe GGG will introduce some new patch in January, and I'm not sure if they don't nerf either Spark or Archmage or I don't know, like ES stacking potential or mana stacking potential. I don't know, or maybe they will nerf rarity. So I forbid myself for some bigger purchases I could do, but I will mention them also later on when we move to the gear part. But yeah, now that's that's the modification I did. A lot of people don't realize that increased duration of elemental alignments in our case of Park and Casson Shock build, it's often damage less multiplier. And the explanation for it is that we want to apply as many as possible shocks on the enemies to be able to activate as much as possible lightning conduits. Yes, and the longer the shock on the enemy it is by itself, the less amount we can apply. For example, the same enemy. Yeah. So for example, a lot of people pick this node. Yes, but this node, okay, it increased the magnitude of shock, but at the same time it increased the shock duration itself, which is in my understanding, in my evaluation, it's a huge trap, because okay, you increase the magnitude of shock itself, it's nice and fancy, but at the same time you are able to increase 25% less shocks potentially on the enemy, because the shocks themselves are longer, so you apply the less amount throughout the lifespan of a monster. Yeah, like my shocks are really quick, because outside of this only node here, I don't really have nowhere increased duration of elemental alignment or shock alignment. I don't have any of those nodes, so my shocks are really like they appear and disappear, appear and disappear. Maybe not that fast, but it's way faster than with this node here. So potentially, if I don't one-shot the enemy, the boss, the rare, the unique, or even don't two-shot enemy, my first instance of lightning conduit reappear way faster than in other people's builds, because I don't have this node, for example, there. And I think also there are some, I could call it trap nodes. So yeah, like the main idea is to, like one shot everything, but sometimes you don't really, but sometimes, like this crit doesn't hit, or you forget to apply the curse or anything, and sometimes you just not one hit enemy, and the second hit without like this node here will just apply way faster. So yeah, so that's huge, I guess, and a lot of people like don't take it into the account. So that's my input there. Okay, so that was about the skill tree. Okay, so I forgot to talk about the gems more deeply, because I think I have some innovative stuff there, which a lot of other content creators don't really talk about. And yeah, at least I was aware while editing this video to talk about this. So the main update or point about the modification to the gems slots there is the fact that a lot of people, especially those who rely only on DPS from the Spark without the DPS from the Castle Shock, they often act like, oh, this DPS here is final, this number must be, like as high as possible, or I don't know, like the number there. Yeah, they go crazy. But in reality, those DPS, it show you to some degree how much damage you deal, but in case of this build, it's not really about influencing, about increasing this number as possible, because the cheapest way to do so in case of Spark is to just get as much cast speed as possible. But in our case, the damage, the place where we want to have as much damage as possible is the lightning conduit. Yeah, in this case, the Spark is there only to apply the shock, and my recent modification to apply also the exposure. And I will talk about this in a second. But yeah, I think a lot of people, especially from YouTubers who bait people into, like mediocre builds, they influence this damage as much as possible. They take the screenshot during the mapping where, like all of additional stuff, all of increases apply, like when you crit, when you hits enemy and all of that crap. But to be honest, this damage here, it could be, like 100. Like, I doesn't care about the DPS here, because the function of shock here is only to apply as much as possible shocks and exposure. And why exposure? The standard Spark and custom shock build say to you that you should apply exposure using Orb of Storms. Yes, and at some point I noticed why some of my shocks are really, like weak. So the points, the energy points in custom shock rise really quickly, and sometimes I see like I find the pause for, like additional couple seconds, and I notice why some shocks don't disappear as quickly. And I notice that unfortunately some shocks can also be applied by Orb of Storms, yes, which, if we take into consideration what I mentioned in the skill tree part, is DPS downgrade, because the shocks from Orb of Storms, which in the standard version of this build, in fact, apply the exposure, because in standard version of custom shock build, you have this exposure support, no, not this one, this exposure, and I believe those two supports, you have those in Orb of Storms. And at the first glance it looks, like, okay, there is nothing wrong with that. But in practice, if you have those two supports there and you allow the Orb of Shocks or Orb of Storm to apply the shock for you, those shocks are not only weaker than the shocks from the Spark itself, they also disappear longer. So, especially for tanky enemies like bosses, it's a huge damage decrease, because we only want, I know I repeated, but it's really important. We only want the shocks from the spark itself. Every other skill cannot apply shock. We know that lightning conduit, it consumes the shock, but there is this effect from quality, chance on consuming a shock on an enemy to reapply it. I have to check it, but I'm not sure if this reapplying the shock, it reapply, like the basic value of the shock, or it reapply the value of shock, which, like, I'm not sure about this effect from quality, because if I have to check it, and probably I will mention it in the comment, maybe at the beginning of next year or maybe even today, I have to check it, because if the shock reapplying, it's like if it reapplied the basic value of shock, its damage decrease, because as I mentioned, we want only the value of shock from the spark, because here we have increased magnitude and also the less duration. So that's really important. But yeah, so it's really important. So I decided to took those two support from Orb of Storms to Spark, not only for like more pleasant gameplay, because now I don't have to spam Orb of Storm like crazy, I believe I never have to, because we have so many damage, but sometimes, especially if you do this like quick ritual before every boss, like you put, like Out of Storm, you put the sigil, you put the curse and everything. Now you don't really have to use it, this spell anymore, because the shock, the exposure, we have everything in this skill, and it's really great, So yeah, so in my case, the spark apply not only the shocks, but also the exposure. So to be able to do so, you need, like at least 5 link, 6 link to either have more projectile speed or increase effect or something. Yeah, you need like more links to be able to do this fancy stuff. I'm yet to test it, but I want to, like find some usage for Orb of Storm. So I'm thinking to like use double Orb of Storm, or maybe singular. As I mentioned, I have to check it. And for it to apply additional electrocution build-up, because there is not really much other gems to choose from, and I think additional electrocute, especially on more tanky enemies or some swarm enemies, it's also like useful. So that's the change here. Also, because like I actually play this build, and like thinking to improve it even more and more, I noticed that this like ritual before every boss, where you put the sigil, you put the arm, you put some other stuff and everything and blah blah blah, it's it can be a little annoying, or maybe if the boss itself, like appear and, for example, move away immediately, like the stupid witch on the swamp map, on this, you know, like tribal village map. You start the fight and this bitch, you know, like fly away. So it's really hard to put the curse on her. And the damage of this build is so high that you can, you know, like nuke that bitch immediately. But to do so, you need, for example, if the map have some, you know, like additional resistance for monster modifier and stuff, you have to apply this curse, yeah. And I found for a lot of bosses, it's much more comfortable to apply this cursed ground effect, yes, because in that way I can curse apply this effect, use the sigil, okay, of course beforehand, yeah, and for now don't see that I have some more minions here because it's, you know, like another addition I made. But I used to have this, you know, like firewall and everything. So now I'm able to, okay, I'm coming to the boss. I put the cursed ground where the boss will, you know, like immediately spawn. Put this stuff also. Spam this shit. Spark. If I feel, you know, like really fancy, I can add just before the activation of boss. I can add uh, Mana Tempest, and, you know, like after this modification, every boss I did, which were Tribe Master level 80, map bosses, every map boss which I ran into, I put this, I start spamming this. I noticed that I'm either coming to the boss or the boss gonna spam. I'm use this, and the boss, you know, like insta die. Especially if the crit hit, and the chance for crit I have currently. Um, Currently the chance is 36. So it's, you know, like it's more than 1 in 3. So that's it. And I find this, you know, curse ground much more comfortable to, you know, like work with, especially if you know, like are afraid that the boss can, you know, like one shot you or do some harm to you. When you want to, you know, like, oh, use this, swap to that weapon. I think it's much more, you know, like better to apply the curse even before the boss itself spawn. You know, because the moment it's spawned, you don't have to use the Q button, the curse, because the curse, as you can see, it linger or already there. So that's the another modification. And the final modification is I saw some, I don't know, Eastern guy, Russian or Ukrainian or I don't know, guy who showed this tech that you can use skeletal cleric or other skeleton on the swap. So on this stuff, because you have the more like spare spirit there, you can use it in combination with soul offering to as you can see, to spawn automatically, because in Perl 2 spawning is automatically, and it's very nice, I guess. Spawn those monster minions and to sacrifice them. And as you can see, we gain like for up to over 7 seconds. Not this timer, this time we gain, let me check again. Over 11 seconds of more spell damage, and more spell damage, it's more damage deal. So in this case, the buff give us, it don't explain it here, I believe, but I believe this buff give us, like maybe between 70 and over 100 more spell damage, which is really crazy if you ask me. Increased buff effect. Okay, maybe it's not because it's 60% there. Yeah, so it give us, so let's cut this, and yeah, it give us around 60% more spell damage. So it's like at least couple million of extra damage, because the extra damage of lightning conduit, it's a bit tricky to calculate, because we have to take into the account the damage of the skill itself, the shock it apply, the magnitude of shock, the magnitude of the spell itself being multiplied by the shock effect, yeah, and the curse and the exposure. Yeah, maybe I will calculate it, but at this point, path of building would be really helpful. Okay, so that's the gem part. Let's move to the next, to the gear. The gear really didn't change that much. Like at this point, I get a slightly better ingenuity belt. I used to have 76%, now I have 79%. So like, that's upgrades. I changed the boots. I think I used to have the better one, but I needed different type of elemental resistance, because I swapped the rings. This ring is better than the one I used to have. It has the increased rarity than the previous one. It have like the mana regeneration, which the previous one didn't have. So yeah, that's the better ring. I think I also got the better wand with more critical hit chance, because as I said, because I want to like go into crit route. So yeah, I think that's it. Because like also uh, because I changed the ring, I could also change the body armor to something better or something different, because at this point a lot of changing of the gear is just shuffling between being able to cap the resistance, so that's the shuffling at this point. So sometimes you like spend 10, 15, 20 divines on almost exactly the same gear piece, but with better, maybe not better, but with different resistance. Yeah, so that's the gear. And also I think I forgot to like highlight it in the previous video or in the previous note. You need 60 spirit, preferably on the body armor, to be able to have cast on shock all the time with Archmage, because you need like total 160 spirits. So that's it. Yeah. As you can see, you can you can you can see some fancy gear here. 5 sockets, more your Invictus, some soul cores, and some amulet, and they are waiting there for my, like next build upgrade, because the plan is to move from energy shield, because as I mentioned in the past, the mind over matter is really good, but you need like over 6, 7, maybe close to 8,000 mana for it to be really, like meaningful in comparison to using this amulet, because as we know, the arcane search stack really heavily with the higher and higher amount of mana. Also the archmage itself, and for example mana tempest, if I recall correctly, also stack with the amount of mana. So yeah, it's really beneficial to go like 7, 8, at least over 6,000 mana amount in comparison to like 5,000 energy shield. But to do this, you need like very expensive gear, and I know that my gear already is really expensive. Yeah, like this belt, I don't know, like it used to be 40 device. Now I think it's closer to 30 device. Yeah, like you can, like, to sum up my gear, I think it's closer to like 200 device for everything, maybe a bit less, because like the prices are changing, and some of the stuff it's really hard to find. Like for example, that kind of gloves, I couldn't find the replacement for it since like, I don't know, like week 1, I would say, because like the rest of the stuff is really inferior to it, because it has a lot of rarity, critical damage bonus, some energy shields, a lot of mana, so some also rest, so it's really hard to like move from this glows. But yeah, I'm thinking to moving to full mana with mind over matter, and full rarity to achieve like over 400, close to 500% of rarity. But the problem, or maybe not the problem, but the delay itself is the fact that we are yet to receive a new patch, and because I don't know what they will nerf in the next patch note, I'm like, I'm not really going full into rarity part, and I'm not going full into mana stacking part. But when I do, I hopefully in like at the start of the January, if they not like say anything about nerving anything, which interests me, yeah. I will go full into rarity and mana stacking, and to achieve this, I think this belt will be best in slot for increased maximum mana and increased rarity of items, with increased rarity of items put inside. Of course, I would need the Trial Master shield, because it's also really helpful for rarity stacking. And to swap into full mana, I would also need amulet with 60 spirit. This one, like, it's not adds up to 60 spirit, but I can re-roll it with device, because I have like a lot of device. So yeah, it's not that I don't have money for an upgrade. I'm just I'm just I'm just cautious about an upgrade, because what's the point of spending, you know, like 200 divines if they can just nerf the shit out of this upgrade? Yeah. The same story with this Terminus. I think that's the name of this, you know, like new hot chest piece, which decrease the cooldown of every spell skill. I think that's this Terminus chess piece is really insane, and I also think that that's the best build in Path of Exile currently, but uh, it's the best only because it reduced the time of this teleport. Yeah, it reduced the time of this what's the name, uh, this blink ability. So yeah, so uh, that's uh, that's hot part of that uh, chess, when you can, you know, like zoom around the map like we used to do in Path of Exile 1. But I guess I think they will nerf the shit out of that chest, maybe even half of that reduction. So you could still have, you know, like 1 second or so cooldown in the blink, so it won't be that crazy broken. But yeah, to finish the thing with the mana stacking potential, I will have, you know, like to put some kind of that level of amulet with, you know, like mana, even more rarity, some cast speed, or the level of all skills, some resistance, some intelligence. This one is, you know, like really little crappy, but I bought it for 2 divines, so I think it's worthy, at least for, you know, like to check the stuff. And also I'm ready to buy this what was the name? Let me check. Dream Fragments Sapphire Ring, which also is, you know, like necessary or really beneficial if you mana stacking, you know, like 20%, 24, or with this belt even more, like 30% more mana is really huge. It would give us a lot of cast speed, a lot of mana regeneration. So yeah, I think with really high additional investment, like over 100 divines, I believe the mind over matter is or could be better than you know, like the split between maybe not split because I'm not mind over matter yet, but this shield, energy shield with this amulet, or from that amulet. Yeah, so the full on mind over matter can be better, but as I said, I forbid myself from buying that ring until, you know, we see the next patch note. So yeah, I think that's it. Also with, you know, like maybe not, maybe when I will finally move to that mind over matter, I will show my plan for the new skill tree. So yeah, so I think that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you will have, you know, like a great one. New Year, the party or the New Year itself will be, you know, like better, or at least as good as the previous one. I hope GGG will not nerf the shit out of this, you know, like archetype of character, because to be honest, if they do, the whole archetype is fucked. Like I can live with even, like even if they nerf the damage by 50%, I'm okay with that, because if you kill something in one hit and if you kill something in two hits, it doesn't really matter. But mm, if they nerf the damage by, for example, 90%, we are fucked. And the whole class is fucked, because the storm weaver ascendancy, I don't really see any, like better build for it, I don't really see the reason to play this class anymore if they nerf too much either mana stacking, or I think if they would nerf the Archmage by a half, it's still okayish. But yeah, if they nerf stacking of shock or stacking of the mana itself or energy shields, yeah, I think it's maybe too harsh for this build. And a lot of different builds, of course, yeah. So that's it. Take care, guys. If you have any questions, please leave a comment, share, like, subscribe. Yeah, I may be a bit slow today, but I'm tired. And the trip tomorrow. So yeah. But I have to do this. I have to make this video. So yeah.